So I've got with me Nandita, and Nandita, as many of you know, is the CEO for Flipkart Myntra, and she's by e-com standards already an industry veteran with a decade plus in the business. She's before that also from the FMCG business. She's worked in HUL, she's worked in Britannia. And of course, she's an engineer, MBA in that sense of the earlier context of how Nagesh was responding to Vineet. It's very interesting. We're going to talk about Bharat, and it's very interesting because this is, now we're going to hear it from the perspective of the biggest online company in the country and how an online company sees Bharat. You know, anybody who's read Sohanlal Dwivedi's "है अपना हिंदुस्तान कहाँ वह बसा हमारे गाँव में." So there is a bit of an opportunity to do that now after your Hindi lessons. So first things first, Nandita, to you. Fill this blank for me. If you have to succeed in Bharat, you have to.
You have to embrace Bharat. I think that's the thing. You can't treat it as an other. It is not an other. It is like you truly have to be. Thanks for having me here. It's been a great 2 days. I've heard from so many people, so I'm really happy to be here. So thanks for having me. But I think the starting point that I tell everybody is I'm from Bharat. I'm from Lucknow, so I'm from a small town. I studied in a smaller town. And I think the fact that you have to embrace Bharat is what can make you succeed. If you other it, then you can't succeed in Bharat.
Super. In your assessment, and I know that you've studied in UP, is there a Bharat? Is there many Bharats? And how do you deal with that as a national organization? How do you deal with that?
I think there are many Bharats, first of all. I think it is not a cliche when we say that India is many Indias or many Bharats. Like there are truly, you move from one city to the other, one state to the other, the language changes, the food changes, the clothes change, what you celebrate changes, how you celebrate changes. And therefore, and I think what has increasingly happened, which is very heartening to see that both Indianness or Bharatness and the speciality that each region actually brings to the table has become more celebrated as you see it over the last 5 to 7 years. Actually, one big post-COVID change that I actually see in consumers, in how you see the world evolving is that India has become very cool. So you don't have to hide the fact that I want to celebrate all Indian festivals. And in a city like Bangalore, actually, we all are celebrating all festivals. So there is Pongal, Bihu, everything being celebrated. So every region is actually being very proud of what they bring to the table and celebrating their differences rather than trying to blend in and come together. So I think that is something that you really have to build as you look at it. So whether it is, we spoke about clothes being different. The sarees that are worn in Kerala are different from what are worn in Tamil Nadu, are different from what are worn in UP. Now, how do you actually build that selection? And I think more importantly, how do you use technology? We don't have, like e-commerce doesn't have the storefronts that they can physically go and change in every city and say, this is what works for one city or the other. So therefore, how do you use personalization to really understand that how do I show merchandise, how do I show fashion, which works for this Bharat? And Bharat 2 sitting in South India is very different from Bharat 3 sitting in West India, and how do you bring that differences? There are so many local brands that actually bring alive those differences. How do you embrace those brands and learn from them and partner with them to be able to build for that audience? So I think using technology for personalization, understanding, I think at a core merchandising level, what are the differences between the two different, or the many different Bharats that we tackle with. And then I think partnering with brands. And finally, I think we still are in the era where language and access is, today, what Bharat actually wants is our brands, our platforms, which understands them, which are able to present product and merchandise which works for them, and actually is customizing for them to make things accessible. So language is one big part of how accessibility works. So we all, and all of us are guilty of it, that we consume e-commerce, media, everything in English. So how do you actually take it to vernacular? So English, for example, is the most searched language on a platform like Myntra. Of course, platforms like Flipkart, etc., have more, vernacular searches, vernacular users, etc.
Is there a plan to go more vernacular?
We will actually go more vernacular. One of the very, very interesting things we did last year, and we saw tremendous, uptake, was that we said we want to build for many Bharat, so actually build for the different cities, build for the 10 regions. And we picked up local influencers who were talking about Myntra and these are local influencers, like if you search on Instagram, etc., these are influencers who are very popular in their city. And they are influencers who are actually just talking about the fact that, why is Pune so great? And why is Nagpur so great? And why is Indore so great? And then we, collaborated with them, and they said, if you want to celebrate this in Indore, why don't you go on Myntra and pick up this, outfit or ensemble? And that has actually helped us more than traditional media. We do reach frequency, all of that. But actually, this helped us move the needle. So really going and being one with that region is what I feel is the, is the answer. If you are going to talk down or talk away from it, it's not something that I think would work in Bharat. They all have the aspiration of what a large city would have. How do you make that aspiration accessible probably is the journey that all of us have to kind of make as we go along.
Super. So we have in this room retailers who are from Bharat. We have RS Brothers here, who has 65 stores in Telangana, Andhra. We have Capsons here who have very strong presence in Punjab, further north. I saw Channa Basappa yesterday, Karnataka. And who are doing a very solid job in Bharat. When you enter some of these markets as an e-com player, how do you differentiate? How do you build further on the market that they have built in these towns? How do you see these opportunities?
I think, like I said, that I think the first thing which is very important, and especially I think as e-commerce is maturing, as digital maturity is happening in the country, you can't have a singular playbook as you go into the country, right? You need multiple playbooks. So I think the first thing is really embracing the fact that you need multiple playbooks for multiple Bharats. Second is actually with some of the brands and the retailers, how do you partner with them versus it's not actually about competing, it's actually about partnering to say that, how do we come together? How do we build something together? So, if you're in Chennai, how do you build on Nalli Silk, for example? Like, how do you build with them rather than kind of, the idea is to build together with the local brands and the local retailers that are there, because the trust that these brands have is something which has really taken a lot of time to build, and the consumers really trust those brands. I think third, like I said, how do you personalize for that region? So when a consumer, like I said, go to the influencers, go to the media choices, do even traditional things like outdoor in a very, very interesting way to reach out to these consumers. But once they come to your platform, how do you ensure that they see an environment which is working for them, in the sense that they can probably see some of their local festivals? So they see Pongal being celebrated in Chennai. They see some of the local merchandise which is relevant for them. They see price points which are accessible. They see language which is accessible to them. So I think these are some of the things which our playbook is there, that how do you really build for that particular city? I think one of our big learning is that you have to build city by city, rather than going and saying that I have a playbook which will work for, say, half of the country. Like this metro, non-metro divide that we've had as big brands, to say metro is one playbook, non-metro is the other playbook. I think that has been my big learning over the last 1.5 years, that the non-metro playbook has to be broken into the many Bharats that we have in the country.
So I recently bought a Louis Philippe t-shirt on Flipkart Minutes, and I got it delivered in 25 minutes. When you go to Bharat, how do you see something like that playing out, where the infrastructure is tough, the logistics is not as organized, etc.? How would you deal with a Bharat with a with an initiative like quick commerce?
I think the first thing that actually Bharat is needing is access. So if you look at the access that they may have to for international brands, or for some of the D2C brands which have physical outlets in a city like Bangalore but may not have outlets in a city like Indore, etc. Their aspiration is right up there. One of the interesting things we found out as we've spoken to consumers is that the aspiration of age groups is more similar than geography. So if I take a Gen Z in Bharat and met the India, their aspirations are actually quite similar because they're consuming the same social media, they're looking at the same films, they're seeing the same Alia Bhatt sari, they're seeing the same Barbie movie getting promoted. So their aspirations are similar, but their ability to access these aspirations is actually very different. So the first problem for Bharat is actually access. I think we are still not there today where we only solve for speed for Bharat. In the 20 minutes, I would say, of course, you have to solve for speed because everybody wants products in 1 day or 2 days. I think the days of having 6 days, 7 days is actually behind us. We need faster, like everyone needs, faster access to things. But the big opportunity in Bharat is access. How do you create access for things which their metro or their India cousins want? When you talk of, I think, again, I would say the point that you made about speed access, I would say the first thing to do is actually leverage the local network of brands and retail which is there, and build that network with them to be able to deliver with speed. As e-commerce matures and as digital commerce matures, I think we will all find ways to build infrastructure. So if the consumer is ready for 20 minutes, or if we build that readiness for 20 minutes, I think one of the things that e-commerce has done well is to really find a way to build that infrastructure. And that I think we will do as we go. The ecosystem is evolving in a way that we will build it. But I think our imperative right now is to keep building access for the aspiration that Bharat has in the country.
Super. So we spoke about the opportunity, the commonalities, etc. But there are things which are different about Bharat. So what would you say would be the big differences? Is the fashion quotient different? Is the way the consumer thinks different? What are the big differences that you see between consumers in Bharat versus some of the metro towns? And to that extent, hence, what would be some of the biggest barriers to growth or to do well in Bharat?
I think the biggest difference I would say is how fashion, what is the spectrum of fashion on which the consumers are. So they may be early adopters more in in India, one as we call them, and Bharat may have fewer early adopters of some of the trends and the fashion quotient that is there. There is also a more community-based living of Bharat. So whether there are more community occasions and therefore fashion which is more acceptable within your family, within your community actually starts playing a role. So I'll give an example. When we look at dresses in Bangalore and Nagpur, for example, and you look at what really sells between these two cities, you start seeing a difference in the length of the dresses actually. So in Bangalore, just data shows that consumers are willing to wear slightly shorter dresses, and then when you go to Nagpur, they're wearing slightly longer dresses. So it's pure data. It's very intuitive. You may think it's not there, but actually when you see the data, you end up seeing that. And therefore, how do you...
Yeah, American Eagle globally has this thing of countries with modesty clothing versus countries with...
Yeah. So, that is one, big nuance that comes in, that more of my occasions are with the community, and therefore, fashion plays a role in standing out in that community, but also being accepted in that community. Like if you look at the India one, it is more individual and more, like I'm hanging out with my friends, my age group, my peer group. And therefore, there is more acceptability and I can push the boundaries a little more. So I think that's the one big difference that you see purely coming through in data, which is there. In fact, like one of the things I found very interesting is that quad sets, which was, a great rage maybe 1.5, 2 years back, that dispersion seemed to happen from Bharat to India because it actually felt to Bharat, like, it felt that this is fashion. I'm wearing Western, but it's also Indian, and therefore that dispersion happened the other way around. So I think that is one thing to from a difference perspective. The other one is really how do you, again, look at the local influences and influencers. So if there are, the local influencer is actually very different from the national influencer, and the TV programs that you're watching, the movies that you're seeing, the influencers you're following, and I think just differentiating that is very, very important from how we look at things. I think one thing which we often don't talk about much is the price point accessibility. I think in metros and in India One, there is a slightly higher acceptance towards price points which are more premium. People are willing to experiment more with fashion with a premium price point. In Bharat, there is still that safety net which a price point affords, which is affordable. So if you look at, again, the discovery of more affordable price points is higher in Bharat than in India. And that's the other big difference to embrace. On a platform like ours, which seems the same to everyone, how do you use, again, personalization to kind of bring it forward? So I would think these are 3 or 4 differences which are very stark between India and Bharat.
So I'm going to open it to the audience soon. So if you have some thoughts, please keep them handy. In the meantime, very quickly, let's say when Allu Arjun wears something in Pushpa 1 or 2, or Dulquer Salman, they create a fashion rage in Bharat as much as they do in. Is there an ASOS equivalent opportunity that you have as seen on the screen kind of thing?
I think 100% I feel, and honestly, like sometimes, and I'll give the other example, that I would think like a Sarojini market actually does a better job at really getting that Allu Arjun Pushpa or the Alia Bhatt sari than big platforms and people with a lot of data and everything do sometimes. So I think, our opportunity is really to embrace that and do much better at it. So I think that's something which is a big opportunity for us.
Right. We have 3 minutes more. Any questions that you have for Nandita, or any thoughts that you would like to share to build or counter what we've discussed so far?
Vishak,
Yeah.
since nobody's asking, you have so much of data with you. So if you look at the current 5 to 10 years old, how do you think they'll be behaving 10 years down the line?
5 to 10 years old.
Current 5 to 10
Current
years.
5 to 10
Pre-alpha,
years old.
beta.
The beta generation. I think, so if what's really important to them and maybe like their slightly older cousins is communities that they build around common interests. So if you look at, and they are going through interests which are maybe like Pokemon or like some of these Japanese cartoons, etc. I think that is something which is really showing up in everything that we also do, that people are really, they are clustering around what they have as common interests. So whether it is a manga comic or a football club or or a music genre that they listen to or a movie that they are a fan of, they are really, I think that community-led fashion is probably something which is going to be big. The other thing which I think is a trend which I just happen to also have a 13-year-old, so a little bit inside information on that generation. But I think they do believe that we are in the like the Gen Z and the millennials are overusing, the current forms of social media. So the constant feedback from that generation is that why do you need to post what you're eating for your breakfast? Nobody wants to know that, Like, but this is, the Gen Zs and the millennials are constantly talking about what they do and showing off in the words of those. So I feel there is going to, and all generations will have a new cool place to hang out. So I think there will probably be some social interaction that they will find which today doesn't exist. And then that will kind of influence fashion a little bit. I think the third thing which I feel, which the Gen Zs also display, especially the younger Gen Zs, and I see this age group also maybe picking up or may change, I don't know, is this anti-fit movement that they have, Like they want to just they want to bury themselves in their clothes. You know, they don't want, like they want long t-shirts. So I think this anti-fit movement is the opposite of the fit movement that the older generation had. So I don't know whether we'll go back to the fit or the anti-fit, but I think these are a few things which I feel are how they build and, you know, double down on communities, how they socially interact with each other. And I think what their payoffs in life are going to be very different. So this is how I think of that generation.
Okay, we have two hands, but Anish will allow one last question. So, all right, the lady here. Yeah.
So you were just speaking about Gen Zs, millennials, Gen Alphas, etc. So being a marketing person, I have a small doubt. Now, is this the marketing concept that we have constructed, or is it actually something that, you know, is important and exists? And like, how does this go?
What a great question. But no, I mean, it's a good question because I think actually from two perspectives, I think this generation of consumer, and I think maybe the age bracket that we have put people in, and you know the hard lines we've made, oh, you're Gen Beta and you're Gen Alpha and you're Gen Z, maybe more of a, not a marketing, but maybe like a, you know, a data or thing that we've created. But I think every 10 to 15 years, generations do change because the circumstances in which you grow up and which you're born are very different, and what your challenges are very different. So I think that is what makes these generations different. So it's not, it's like the hard lines may be what we have created, but for sure, if you look at the 10 to 12, 15-year mark of how you see what really drives people, what are their motivations, what are their consumption habits, both on media and otherwise, they tend to be different. And as people who are, you know, for whom those are consumers, how they consume our product becomes very, very different. So I do feel that there is a big like when you start actually going down the route of finding the difference between the generations, you actually start finding very stark, obvious differences which you have actually ignored because you've not looked for the differences. So the differences are very stark, and increasingly I feel the generations are wanting to really embrace their differences. So they are saying we are different, this is what we want, and we don't want what the generation before us wanted. So it's, I would say that as a market, actually what I'm like, the reason why I found your question interesting is that as a person, like we all build digital media, we work with digital media. I really feel media is going through a lot of change right now. Meghna is sitting here, she's not telling us the secrets, so we should ask her. But the thing is that I do feel that my learning of what we did 10 years back, I'm not able to apply the same playbook to this consumer, to this media. I'll use the word algorithm, Meghna. But so to that is very different, and we have to relearn and learn again. So that's my.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. As I bring this discussion to a close, you spoke about quad sets. So I have to quote stand-up comedian Amit Tandon, who said this to all women, that look, there will come a day when we will understand the difference between a quad set and a night suit. But today is not that day. So on that note, Nandita.
I must add that men are also embracing the quad set. So
so
you should
also,
ask them.
Yeah. So on that note, Nandita, you've been fantastic as usual. And thank you for being a lovely audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.